Thank you for joining us. We begin our report on the presidential campaign trail with less than 70 days to go until Election Day. Both candidates are campaigning in battleground states Thursday. Vice President Kamala Harris spoke to voters down in Georgia, while former President Trump traveled to Michigan. That's where he blamed Harris for supporting programs that have contributed to inflation.
Over the past 4 years, Kamala and crooked Joe Biden have presided over an economic reign of terror, committing one financial atrocity after another. As vice president, Kamala cast the deciding votes that caused the worst inflation in American history. You're all victims of it. We all are. Everybody is a victim of it.
Vice President Kamala Harris, pronounced Kamala, also focused on the economy in her rally, describing an ambitious goal should she be elected president.
We fight for a future where we build what I call an opportunity economy, so that every American has the opportunity to own a home, to start a business, and to build wealth and intergenerational wealth.
I'm joined now by political reporter Aaron Navarro, who is following the Harris campaign in Savannah, Georgia, and campaign reporter Torian Small, who's traveling with the Trump campaign in Michigan. Good to be with both of you. Aaron, I'll start with you. So what was the focus of the rally there in Savannah today?
John, it was pretty much a continuation and repeat of her DNC convention speech in Chicago last week. And the crowd was really receptive here when she talked about the issue of abortion rights and women's rights. At one point, she repeated the line that she had in the DNC last week, where she said that Trump and anti-choice Republicans are, quote, out of their minds. That got a big reaction here from the crowd. And she also talked about her economic plan, calling it an opportunity economy focused on lowering costs and making homes more affordable for first-time buyers.
And Torian, Trump's stop in Michigan was supposed to center on the economy and manufacturing. We got a little of the sound there from his remarks. Were they a policy speech that's basically all an attack on Harris, or was there a portion where he talked about policies he might promote as president?
Well, John, the former president certainly led on the economy when he talked to this pretty small crowd. It was about a few hundred people at this manufacturing plant in Michigan. He made the case that he would be the sole candidate to bring back the golden days of booming manufacturing for small towns like here in Potterville. He also went after Kamala Harris on inflation, saying that she is the key reason why the Biden administration saw surge in prices for consumers. But that quickly took a turn as he lobbed some personal attacks at the vice president, calling her names, calling her out of her name, and then also, linking her to some other things, a part of the administration, not necessarily related to the economy. The key here is that former President Donald Trump is not necessarily moving closer to sticking to messaging like some Republicans would like him to do. He knows that his supporters like the fact that he's a bit off the cusp and can be offensive sometimes in some of his off-color remarks.
Aaron, we've, the Harris campaign experienced a high level of enthusiasm, a lot of people showing up at these events. But because she was new, lots was changing in the Democratic Party. But the Democratic National Convention has happened. Is there still that same level of enthusiasm? What's the mood there on the trail relative to the way it was before the DNC?
John, this was another one of those big rallies. Yes, it was a little bit of a smaller town in Savannah. Yes, a little bit of a smaller arena, I think around the 10,000 cap. But the energy was still here throughout her remarks. You would hear people chant or try to start chants, either saying USA or we're not going back. And Harris made sure to note in her speech that she still considers herself an underdog in this race, trying to convince and make sure that these Democratic voters or maybe moderate voters know that there is work to be done in the next 68 days, that they do not have this race locked up, despite some of the polls showing, her gaining momentum. So it's really an urgence of caution to the crowd here, saying that we have some momentum right now, but we still have work to do.
Torian, Trump's focus this week will be on the blue wall battleground states in the Midwest. What's your sense of their strategy there? And is he appealing specifically to the audiences on that geographical? Is he making a specific geographical pitch?
Well, sure. I think what we saw today, actually, Donald Trump announced that under his administration, he would mandate that the government or insurance companies cover the costs for IVF treatment for families. He says that this is a pro-family policy platform that he's looking to move forward. And this is a push more to the center. This also complicates Republicans' stance on, or as the party leader now, the Republican stance on pro-life arguments, but again, making this pitch to places in blue states like a Michigan, like a Wisconsin, part of the traditional Democratic blue wall. He's looking to rebuild that winning 2026 coalition where those states were pretty crucial to his victory.
Aaron Navarro and Torian Small, thank you both. You may have heard there was an incident during Donald Trump's Monday visit to Arlington Cemetery. What distinguishes this from other Trump incidents is that the rules at the center of the story are particular. Arlington is the final resting place of the men and women who sacrificed for their country. Its rules are not mere suggestions. They honor that sacrifice. CBS News Pentagon reporter and producer Eleanor Watson joins me now to help unpack this story. Eleanor, what more do we know about the incident and kind of the trail of what we've learned and how it came about?
Hi, John. The Army is now directly contradicting the Trump campaign's account of what happened on Monday. In a statement released today, the Army says that a female staffer was, quote, abruptly pushed aside by members of the Trump campaign team. That directly contradicts the campaign claim that no physical altercation occurred. The Army says the staffer did file a report with the military police, but is deciding not to press charges. According to the Army, the staffer has faced unfair attacks for trying to enforce rules that were given to the Trump campaign ahead of time about filming at the cemetery. Some of those attacks come not only from Trump supporters, but also from the Trump campaign itself, whose communications director claimed that the staffer was, quote, clearly suffering from a mental health episode. The Army's statement, which is rare for them to wade into a political controversy, directly rebukes the Trump campaign and defends the cemetery official, noting that the cemetery staff every year puts on nearly 3,000 public ceremonies like the one on Monday without any incidents.
And Eleanor, tell us about Section 60, which is where this took place, and the rules that are ironclad and longstanding for that section of Arlington National Cemetery.
Yeah, well, federal law prohibits filming and photography throughout the cemetery related to campaigns and any partisan activity. But officials are particularly sensitive about Section 60, and that's for good reason. Section 60 is considered, and when you go, feels like sacred ground. That's because, as you noted, that's where the veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan are buried and are still regularly visited by their immediate family members, their parents, their siblings, their spouses, their kids. And that's why the cemetery has very strict rules about filming there. Now, some family members of victims killed in the Abbey Gate bombing did invite former President Trump, and for sure it could be an honor to have a former president visit, but there are strict rules in place because there are other families who have loved ones buried there who may grieve differently. We heard from one of those families last night in a statement from Master Sergeant Andrew Marcasano's family said that they learned from Arlington that the Trump campaign did not adhere to the rules and that, quote, they hope that those visiting this sacred site understand that these were real people who sacrificed their lives for freedom.
Eleanor Watson at the Pentagon for us. Thank you so much. UN officials say the Israeli military will pause its operations across Gaza starting this weekend so that polio vaccines can reach hundreds of thousands of children. The vaccination campaign will begin Sunday and last 3 days. World health authorities have pressured Israel to address the emergence of polio in Gaza after the first case of the disease was confirmed there for the first time in 25 years. On Thursday, Israel's deadly military operation continued for a second day in the occupied West Bank. The IDF says it killed 5 militants, including a prominent commander who was responsible for attacks against Israeli civilians. CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tayeb is in the West Bank with the latest. Imtiaz?
Well, as you can see, this building is really in near ruins following that massive raid by Israeli soldiers where they set off explosives here, causing all this damage. Now, according to the Israeli military, this building was being used to store weapons, something locals here say is simply not true. This is just a neighborhood full of families. Whatever the case, it really just underscores just how desperate the situation here is in the West Bank following the massive raids launched by Israel in several towns and refugee camps just like this one here. Now, at least 10 people have died so far, and there have been mass arrests as well. And the Israelis have been making it very clear that this is just the beginning. John.
Imtiaz Tayeb in the West Bank. Thank you. The United States and Ukraine confirmed an American-made F-16 fighter jet crashed Monday while repelling a massive Russian aerial attack. The pilot was killed. It's the first reported accident involving an F-16 since Ukraine began receiving shipments of the supersonic aircraft several weeks ago. U.S. officials say the jet does not appear to have been shot down by Russia. It also comes the same week that Moscow launched one of its largest air assaults on Ukraine since the war began 2.5 years ago. After the FBI was accused of mishandling the investigation into allegations of sexual misconduct by U.S. gymnastics Dr. Larry Nassar, the Bureau promised to update its process, but it's still falling short. This is according to a new Justice Department watchdog report released Thursday. Of the 300-plus child sexual abuse cases from 2021 and 2023 that were reviewed, 42 of them were flagged by the Inspector General. That's because investigators found zero evidence that any investigative steps were taken by the FBI in those cases. The investigation also found that in nearly half of the reviewed cases, there was no evidence that the FBI abided by the rules requiring allegations to be reported to local law enforcement. The Inspector General is calling on the FBI to develop a new plan to tackle the increasing number of cases and to make up for their shortcomings. The United States is resuming a migrant sponsorship program it paused last month over fraud concerns. It allows up to 30,000 people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela to come to the country every month if a U.S. sponsor agrees to support them. The Biden administration launched the initiative in 2022. The new route decreased the incentive to cross the border illegally, and fewer migrants from those countries ended up doing so. But in July, officials raised concerns about fraudulent sponsor applications. The program is restarting with an enhanced vetting process. When a deadly bacteria enters the food supply, who's to blame? We're learning new details about that listeria investigation at a Boar's Head facility. We'll tell you who federal regulators are pointing the finger at. One of the strongest storms in decades is tearing through Japan. We'll have the latest on the devastation after the break. You're streaming The Daily Report.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
of We the People.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Bugs, mold, and mildew. That is what inspectors say they found at a Boar's Head plant that's been linked to a nationwide listeria outbreak that's being blamed for at least 9 deaths. The health violations are detailed in records released by the Agriculture Department. Some specifics include insects in or around deli meats, mold and mildew near sinks where employees wash their hands, a, quote, rancid smell in a cooler, and leaking or pooling water in the plant. One puddle so bad it had, quote, green algal growth inside. Barbara Kowalczyk joins us now from Washington. She's the director of the Institute for Food Safety and Nutrition Security at the George Washington University. Thank you so much for joining us. How does it get this bad? How does this happen?
Well, thank you for having me. And I think it's very unfortunate that it got this bad. Clearly, there were multiple breakdowns in food safety systems, both within the establishment. Listeria monocytogenes is a pathogen, a very deadly pathogen that we know is associated with ready-to-eat products like deli meats. There's been numerous outbreaks in the past. But obviously, there were breakdowns at the establishment when you look at all these inspection reports around sanitation, around physical hazards, around record keeping, and it was repeated over time, which suggests that there were organizational and cultural issues in the establishment around food safety. Unfortunately, our regulatory system also had a failure in that this problem went on for quite some time, despite documentation by inspectors, but yet the plant wasn't closed down or they didn't recall the product.
Barbara, tell us what happens. Walk us through a typical inspection for something like this for people who may be buying any kind of deli meat from now on. Like, what's the normal course of events? How does it go?
Right. Well, first of all, I'm not an inspector. I'm an academic. But under USDA regulations, every plant that produces meat and poultry products has to be inspected on a daily basis. So that means that every day an inspector goes through, they know the regulations, they're going to document those, check to make sure that the establishment's meeting those regulations. And when they don't, they write what's called a non-compliance report, or it's sometimes referred to as an NR. And those NRs document problems in the plant. And what was released shows that over the past year, there have been multiple violations, as you already pointed out, that suggest ongoing sanitation issues. Meat and protein residue on equipment, on on the walls, and that suggests that they weren't cleaning as thoroughly as they should. There was also condensation reported in the coolers and leaking pipes. And one thing, Listeria monocytogenes, and actually most foodborne pathogens, love water. And so if you have standing water, you have condensation around, they can grow, and they can actually form biofilms, which are incredibly hard to get rid of.
Okay, I've got 10,000 questions for you, but not enough time. Let me ask you about this. The USDA issued a statement to CBS saying it was relying on the state to oversee the Virginia Boar's Head plant. Is that the regulatory system breakdown you're talking about? Is that normal?
That is normal. So sometimes what the regulatory agencies do, both USDA does this and FDA does this, is sometimes they delegate inspections to the state Department of Health or the Department of Agriculture, depending on the state. So that's not uncommon, and they get paid typically to do that. And they serve as an inspector, as a USDA inspector on behalf of USDA. So the problem is that either the inspector didn't tag the product or didn't ask or suggest that the plant needed to be shut down, or the supervisors didn't ask for it. There was obviously a failure in that command chain that didn't happen.
Barbara, final question. Is this symptomatic of a larger problem, or might this just be a series of bad kind of localized to this one plant, to this one chain of bad events?
Well, our food system is very complex. Remember, our food comes from the environment, and you have to think about, we have lots of tools in our toolbox to help prevent contamination of food. And if you remember back to COVID and our Swiss cheese model, it works in food safety as well. And sometimes all the holes line up and something bad happens. And clearly we have to do better. The company needs to do a root cause analysis as to what happened, and the agencies need to do a root cause analysis to figure out where the breakdowns were and how to prevent them going forward.
Barbara,
the bottom line is American lives are at stake. There are 9 people dead because of this failure.
Exactly right. Well put. Barbara Kowalczyk, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
A court in Hong Kong convicted 2 journalists Thursday on sedition charges. This was the first sedition trial against journalists since 1997, when Hong Kong was returned to Chinese rule from Britain. The former editors of the now shuttered Stand News were arrested in December of 2021, accused of publishing articles critical of the government. Both pleaded not guilty. Hong Kong first started cracking down on dissent in 2019 during major pro-democracy protests. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan met with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing Thursday. This comes as the 2 global superpowers look to maintain open communications with each other and improve relations. The 2 sides discussed several issues, including American citizens detained in China, Taiwan, and China's support of Russia. President Biden and Xi Jinping are expected to meet soon as well. The last time the 2 met was November in San Francisco. One of the strongest typhoons in decades swept through southern Japan this week. It's still on the move, but it has been downgraded to a severe tropical storm. Torrential rain and strong winds from Shanshan created several landslides that swept through the region. At least 4 people have been killed and more than 90 injuries have been reported. Japan has ordered more than 5 million people to evacuate. The storm has also left at least 237,000 homes without power. The Japan Meteorological Agency is warning other parts of the country to brace for more landslides and flooding. The drought has gotten so bad in the South African country of Namibia that it plans to cull more than 700 wild animals and distribute the meat to its citizens. That includes 83 elephants, 30 hippos, 100 wildebeests, and 60 buffaloes, according to the country's Ministry of Environment, Forestry, and Tourism. This is happening because Namibia is in the middle of a severe drought. According to the United Nations, half of the population is experiencing acute food insecurity right now. AAA expects travel for this Labor Day weekend to be up 9% compared to last year. This may lead to larger airport crowds and longer security lines, but our Roxana Saberi reports the increase in travel is actually for a good reason.
John, we've seen very few flight delays and cancellations on the monitors here at Newark Airport, and that's good news for people flying in here or people flying out of here who are trying to get their long holiday weekend started early. The FAA expects this Labor Day weekend will be its busiest in decades, with more than 52,000 flights taking off just today. And part of the reason for that is lower airfares. The booking app Hopper says those airfares domestically are 5% lower this holiday weekend than they were a year ago. Some of the top destinations, AAA says, for people who are flying or driving are Seattle, Orlando, Anchorage, New York, and Boston. A lot of people will also be hitting the roads, thanks in part to lower gas prices. Nationwide, the national average is $3.36 a gallon, and that is almost 50 cents lower than this time last year. As for when to drive to avoid the crowds, the best times, if you go tomorrow, are before noon or after 7 p.m. And when you're heading home, if you're going home on Monday, try to drive out early in the morning, or if you can wait until Tuesday, drive home on Tuesday afternoon or evening. John?
Roxana Saberi at Newark Liberty International Airport. Thank you. Still to come, a new battle involving big tech. Google gets hit with an antitrust lawsuit from one of its longtime rivals. We'll review the dispute happening in Silicon Valley. You're streaming The Daily Report.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate. Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing or bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm John Dickerson. Here are some additions to our top stories. The United Nations World Health Organization says there will be limited pauses in fighting in Gaza in an effort to boost vaccinations. The pauses will allow workers to vaccinate hundreds of thousands of children against polio. This comes after a baby contracted the first confirmed case in Gaza in 25 years. Ukraine says one of its American-made F-16 fighter jets crashed on Monday, killing the pilot. The incident happened during an operation to repel a Russian airstrike. Earlier reports indicate the plane was not shot down by the Russians. The FDA is expanding the number of people who need to show a photo ID to buy tobacco products, upping the age from anyone under 27 to anyone under 30. The new policy also bans retailers from selling tobacco in vending machines where people under 21 are allowed to enter. Profits are up for Nvidia, the tech company known for producing artificial intelligence chips. Revenue in the second quarter was $30 billion. That's an increase of 15% from the first quarter and a 122% rise from a year ago. Wall Street is taking note. Nvidia stock closed down more than 6%, though, Thursday. But overall, it's been up 150% this year. Nico Grant joins me for more. He's a technology correspondent for the New York Times. Nico, help me understand. Nvidia reported strong second quarter earnings that exceeded Wall Street expectations, but the stock dropped by a pretty good amount. What gives?
Yeah, this is not just strong earnings, but really massive. I mean, 122% growth. This is a company that is at the heart of the AI boom. It basically makes the plumbing that companies like Google and OpenAI with ChatGPT use to have their AI systems work. And I think what we saw was incredibly high expectations from Wall Street. It happens sometimes that, Wall Street needs a higher beat and a sort of bigger beat in order to be impressed. Nvidia also announced yesterday that it was having some problems with an upcoming version of its chip technology that will be devoted to AI workloads. It still says that customers will receive those AI chips this year, so ultimately it won't be too much of a delay, but I think that the expectations were just incredibly high.
Nvidia has a market cap of over $3 trillion, one of only 3 companies to ever do that. I mean, expectations, at some point there has to be a ceiling. So I guess what the question I'm stumbling towards here, Nico, is where does this expectations mismatch exist relative to the larger question of is there too much hype about AI? Has that hype cooled? It doesn't seem like it. It seems like they wanted, the expectations were super high for Nvidia for AI.
Yeah, I think that for Nvidia, they have a problem that I have seen Zoom have in the past, where during the pandemic, Zoom became an essential service and it started posting these insane numbers, growing by well more than 100%. And what happens is that investors get very used to it. You also start to see, in the case of Nvidia, retail investors coming in, people kind of viewing, opportunities to make money off of it. And with the stock at over $3 trillion, it's also an opportunity to sell and to make a profit. We're seeing Wall Street banks tell their clients today that you should buy what they call the dip. The fact that it's slightly lower is unlikely to last. There's some profit taking, and there are some folks who may be concerned by troubles with upcoming chips that they have. And the company said that it's going to grow about 80% in terms of revenue in the upcoming quarter. So the pace of growth may slow, which may also raise questions about how long they can really keep this up.
Let me switch gears here and ask you about another tech story. Yelp has now sued its longtime rival, Google. What exactly is Yelp alleging?
Yeah, Yelp is saying something that it has complained about for a very long time, that Google prioritizes its own technology, its own local search services when you do a Google search, say on a restaurant or a hair salon that's nearby. Google will show a map of theirs, and they will basically have the information about the businesses. And below that, Yelp has to compete for space with other companies, such as maybe TripAdvisor and other companies that present information. Yelp is saying that by doing this, Google is basically taking the monopoly that they have in general search services, which we use for finding out information about anything, and trying to build a monopoly in local search as well. And, what is on the company's side to some, particularly to Yelp's lawyers, they believe, is the fact that Google just lost a landmark antitrust case in federal court in Washington, D.C. earlier this month, in which a federal judge declared the company an illegal monopolist. And now we are going to see a legal process to determine what consequences Google must face for that. But that establishes precedent for Yelp to say, well, see, it is a monopolist when it comes to general search, and therefore it is using that power unfairly to prevent Yelp from getting enough traffic and therefore from getting enough advertisers to really be able to grow its business and be competitive against Google.
And so briefly, what does this mean for the consumer in the future? Does Yelp make a claim of, if it gets a remedy, this will be the better experience for the consumer? What will search look like if Yelp wins?
If Yelp wins, then we will see that Google would have to compete with Yelp. If you search for a plumber that's nearby, for instance, or for a cafe, you may see Yelp. If Yelp has more reviews at the top, you may see a Yelp link at the top rather than seeing Google. And it would mean that Google's services are further down on the page. And so that link to Google Maps might be just a little bit harder to find.
Nico Grant with the New York Times. That was very helpful. Thank you so much, Nico.
Thank you.
Higher interest rates are having an effect on the housing market. According to the National Association of Realtors, pending home sales fell 5.5% in July. That's the lowest reading since the index started tracking back in 2001. Year over year, pending transactions were down 8.5%. And there's some relief for home buyers. According to Freddie Mac, the average rate on a 30-year mortgage is currently under 6.35%. That's the lowest level since May of 2023. Ahead of the holiday weekend, storms are moving across the Midwest, and tropical downpours are expected to affect the Gulf Coast. For more, here's meteorologist Mike Bettis from our partners at the Weather Channel.
Plenty of severe thunderstorms in our forecast for the remainder of the day and well into the night as well. That includes locations across the upper Midwest, Minneapolis solidly in that, but it could extend all the way over into, say, eastern Iowa, places like Davenport and the Quad Cities over into Illinois as well. So the front here late in the week provides some storms and a lot of heat ahead of it. Behind that front, though, some cooler air just in time for the holiday weekend, but it does bring some storms initially. Then another front behind it is the one that really cools us down. We dry out as well, so I don't think the weather could get any better for the Labor Day weekend. Those of you that aren't so lucky end up dealing with some storms here that could include the I-10 and I-20 corridors through the weekend. But look at these temperatures, oh so comfortable. A lot of you in the 70s and 80s, and morning temperatures, by the way, in the 50s, so maybe some hints of fall coming our way. Other big story that we're going to follow is now through the holiday weekend and beyond. Non-stop rainforest here across the Gulf Coast, in particular Texas and Louisiana. Really heavy rain on the way, potentially double-digit rainfall totals for us here, which could lead to additional flooding. And for more in-depth coverage, you can always check us out on the Weather Channel and live on your favorite TV streaming device.
Mike Bettis, thank you. Book publishers are hitting back against Florida for a state law that targets so-called explicit books. A look at the First Amendment case and whether it could end up before the Supreme Court. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Telegram CEO Pavel Durov has been charged in France for allegedly allowing criminal activity on the popular messaging app. The Russian-born billionaire is barred from leaving France pending further investigation. He also has to pay about $5.5 million in bail. Prosecutors claim Telegram is being used for organized crime and to distribute narcotics and child pornography. French President Emmanuel Macron says Durov's detainment is part of an independent police investigation, but free speech advocates have accused the country of political persecution because Durov is a Russian citizen. However, Durov hasn't lived there in a decade. Earlier this month, several American residents were released from Russia in the biggest international prisoner swap since the Cold War. One of them was journalist Vladimir Kara-Murza. He's a contributing columnist for the Washington Post. Kara-Murza, who was born in Russia, was detained 2 years ago and eventually sentenced to 25 years in prison for criticizing Russia's invasion in Ukraine. In his first column since being released, Kara-Murza said that while he and several others were freed, hundreds of political prisoners remain. He wrote, quote, "The exchange on August 1 has shown that the free world cares and that contrary to stereotype, there is still room for decency and values in international politics. We must not rest until the others who are unjustly imprisoned by Putin's dictatorship are home and reunited with their families too." Several major American publishers are suing Florida over a law that bans books with sexual content from schools. Some of the banned material includes literary classics such as Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse 5, Ernest Hemingway's For Whom the Bell Tolls, and Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina. The publishers claim the removal of these novels from schools and libraries has led to indiscriminate book banning, which violates the First Amendment. They say the issue is that they're being removed for being pornographic when in reality they do not contain obscene material. For more on this, let's bring in CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson. She's a professor of law at Loyola Law School in Los Angeles. Good to be with you again, Jessica. What initially prompted this law and the state's subsequent book bans?
Well, there are a number of different laws in conservative states where conservative activists and lawmakers have tried to put school libraries on essentially tighter leashes. And the objection by some parents and advocates is that their kids are being shown too many books with sexual content and, in fact, pornographic content. One of the books I believe that Governor DeSantis mentioned was a book based on a true life story of two male penguins who were raising a baby penguin in a zoo. And the idea behind the book, in part, was about having two same-sex parents. But this is not just Florida. There are other states as well, and they're all working together to create greater restrictions on the books that can be shown in school libraries.
And the DeSantis administration said that these laws are aimed, as you say, at removing books about gender and other issues related to what they call pornographic acts involving teens and adults. But a lot of these books, that just isn't in the books. So are they making an argument here, or are they just using this to take off books that they just don't like?
Well, I think they're making an argument here. And I think critics and those who filed a suit would say this is just about, one, it's politically expedient to say to parents who are upset, we are on it. We are banning these books. Don't worry, you get more control over your child's education. Because remember, part of this, of course, is saying to parents who are worried about what their kids are seeing, don't worry, you get more control. And part of this law is, in fact, allowing anyone, including a parent, to walk in and say, I object to this book, at which point the book is pulled off the shelves within 5 days. And there's really an indeterminate amount of time that school officials can say, is there sexual content in this book, or should it be put back on the shelves? So the DeSantis administration is saying it's absolutely within their legal purview because courts have given public school officials broad latitude to determine for pedagogical reasons what they're going to put on those shelves.
So this gets me to my favorite question, which is, where do you draw the line? So in May, a judge wrote an opinion in a separate lawsuit involving these book bans, and he said the schools have the right to determine what materials they offer in libraries, but that the judge was not convinced that these removals didn't run afoul of the First Amendment, which is to say, to remove the double negative, that they might run afoul of the First Amendment. So where do you draw the line? How do you draw the line?
I love that you love this question because it's such a complicated question. So the answer is, and this is my most favorite answer, it depends. It depends on the specifics of the particular law. So in Florida's case, the suit is not actually saying overturn the entire law, and it's not saying put those books back. What it's saying is a bit more specific. It says that with respect to the two provisions dealing with sexual content and pornography, that those are vague and overbroad, and therefore they run afoul of the First Amendment because, to your question, we don't know where to draw the line. And this is one of the biggest issues in the First Amendment. Where do you draw the line between the things that we can restrict? And those are things like child pornography and obscenity. And the test to determine what falls within those buckets is difficult. And then what are the types of things we can't restrict? And then add one more layer, which is we're not just in any place. We're in a school library where kids are accessing these books. And now you have a line drawing Venn diagram that perhaps our nation's highest court will have to sort out.
Well, you just answered that question. I'll ask you this one shortly. You said that the DeSantis administration in Florida was allowed to remove these books for pedagogical reasons. What's the argument there? What does it have to do with the teaching in school that makes removing these books okay?
This is another great question. Well, what the courts have said basically is not specifically that the DeSantis administration or that the local school districts here can remove books, but in general, that they don't want judges second guessing these decisions. That if a school librarian or if parents pushing a school librarian, but if people on the ground who are not judges are saying, you know what, we think for a variety of educational reasons that we don't want our kids to see this type of material at the school library, that judges really won't look under the hood, put themselves in the shoes of these school officials and say, well, I'm not so sure. All of which is to say school officials and the laws that they enforce, we give them broad latitude.
Excellent. Jessica Levinson, as always, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The ocean is full of mysteries, but sometimes you end up spotting a flying spaghetti monster. Up next, we'll tell you about a 28-day underwater exploration that contains sightings of some of the rarest ocean species. We're streaming The Daily Report.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Oceanographers exploring an underwater mountain range off the coast of Chile captured footage of a rare squid and spotted a flying spaghetti monster. You're looking at a squid species so rare that scientists have only studied dead specimens of it. The cameras also captured footage of a Bathyphysa siphonophore, also known as the flying spaghetti monster for its super long tendrils. The underwater mountain range was also a spectacle. It's over 2 miles tall, making it taller than Mount Olympus. We all probably try to catch up on our sleep over the weekend. Now, a new study from China says doing so may decrease the risk of heart disease. Researchers analyzed data from more than 90,000 people over 14 years, sleep-deprived participants who spent 1 to 16 hours catching up on lost sleep were 20% less likely to develop heart disease. The study is yet to be published in a peer-reviewed publication and will be presented to a cardiology conference on Sunday. Regardless, experts agree that catching up on a sleep debt is still not a true replacement for getting a consistent 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night. We're going to take a quick break. More news ahead. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why? You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that?
Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
Is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean? What does that mean in
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened? Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
There is no more room in our